I'm now going to introduce Alfred Biehler onto the stage. Alfred's going to talk about the people, process and culture aspects. People, process and technology, they will take a part in making sure that we can capture this opportunity. So Alfred, over to you, and I'm just going to switch the slides.
Thank you very much. It's such a privilege and honor to spend some time with you. I've had some great conversations already, and my expectation is that we're going to continue that over the next 30 minutes. In fact, I want to start by asking you, what are the things that you feel are hurdles that's holding you back from innovating? So my history is I've been at Google for 13 years, before that Microsoft for a decade. In between I've started a few businesses, before that I started a few businesses, and now I'm a freelancer. So I love business. I absolutely love business. And I love technology. I mean, yesterday I built my own Gemini with Gemini. I mean, how good is that? And so I love playing with technology, but I've seen time and time again that innovation sometimes fail. I'd love to know from you, why do you think innovation sometimes doesn't succeed in your organizations?
It's often, sometimes in my experience, anyway, developed as a product rather than actually for the consumer. So there's really no need. It's just an interesting product.
Right. That definitely happens a lot. People build stuff because we can. Frankly, that's the AI story. AI is there, we're excited about it, now let's build it. And then ask the question why, right? What else? Yes?
Actually, I think one of the hurdles to innovation is the fear of failure and the prioritization of the business to allocate budget to an initiative that might fail. And therefore, if it fails, it's seen as a failure, then actually that is innovation. So the point of innovation is there should be more failures, but you should give people the space and the votes to deliver.
You know, I vividly remember the day when Bill Gates came to Cambridge, to the Microsoft Research Center there, and he asked the team, what's your failure rate? And they said, oh, it's actually pretty low. It's only 40% of our products fail. And he said, that's not high enough. You need to push that failure rate up, because otherwise you're playing it too safe. So yes. Anything else? What else is driving or stopping you from getting success with your innovation?
There's agreements it can be put inside the regular business BAU lens rather than something separate. It's about to fail. So it's got additional ROI. When's it going to return it? And obviously that goes back to the
So many organizations love to form the separate entity that's the innovation arm or the incubation center. And that's got real benefit in doing that, because you're not tied to all the normal things, but bringing it back into operations where actually it works and it complies to the rest and it's secure and it actually delivers results and benefit. It's really hard, right? So that flip is hard. Anything else?
Bureaucracy, I would say. Like teams want to build stuff and they have to go through hurdles of, you have your ADRs, your PRDs, your design documents, and you like talk to 3 or 4 different teams. So it takes like 3 or 4 months until they'll be able to start building something. Well, at the same time, like in 1 week, they should be able just to prove it.
Correct. I was speaking to a team that's running innovation organization yesterday. And one of the things that team said was that they're spinning up loads of processes to help with innovation. And I told them, unless it's so valuable and easy for the employees, general employees, that they want to use those tools because it helps them, they're just going to be in the way. They're just going to make the innovation harder, right? So you're right, the bureaucracy is really important to consider, right? I know it's done with good intent to have some guardrails, but make your guardrails such that it's easier to play within the sandbox than it is to spin up skunk works and actually cause some trouble. Right, I am delighted with the responses. I predicted that that's what you're going to say. So you would see that my slides actually reflect the same thing. I would like to flag to you, I think the number one thing that you should do actionably now to make sure that your innovation is done in the right direction. I had a discussion with Marcus. Where are you? Milk. Thank you very much. I asked Marcus, what do you do? What's the organization you're working for? Modern Milkman. And his response was beautiful, because it talked about this dream of getting this glass bottle of milk outside your door. It didn't talk about, oh, I'm running logistics. right? He talked about the value that he's adding and how he's taking care of the planet. And so having this understanding as to what winning looks like is so important. If you fall into the trap of saying winning means I make more money, you've lost. Making more money, growth, salaries increase, profit increase is not the purpose. It is the blood, the oxygen that keeps the business alive, that fuels it, that makes it go faster. But it's not the purpose. As soon as that becomes your purpose, you've missed it, right? And you need to continuously communicate that very well to the team. People forget that. If you haven't in the last month explained that vision and purpose as to why you exist to your team, you need to do that. You need to do it on a regular basis. I'll tell you a quick story here, which I think was fascinating. This is an old story from Google, sort of maybe 20 years ago. There was an engineer who thought, this AI thing is coming along, machine learning. I need to learn how to do this. So he hunted around for some data to build a model, because that's a starting point for any model. You need data. And he asked around in Google, and Google has got a lot of data, but most of it's locked down and secure and privacy controlled and what have you. So the only data he could easily get at was one of his mates working at a data center that controlled the on-off of the thermostat, that controlled the chillers that keep the computers cold. And so he got the data as to what the temperatures were outside and inside, and when the machines were on and off, and he built a machine learning model there to try and optimize for energy efficiency and to protect the planet. And he built this model, and to his delight, it was really easy to build, and he got fantastic early simulation results. This simulation promised that he could save 100% of the energy. And I thought, wow! And then when he looked into it and he showed it to his mates, they looked and said, yes, it does save 100% of your energy by turning off all the cooling completely. It saves 100% of the energy. Your machines might melt down, but that's a different problem, because the target he gave the machine learning model is, how do I save energy? Without considering the consequences, the unintended consequences. So if your target for your organization is just more money, there are some really easy ways to get more money. You just steal the money, right? That gets you instant money, but it doesn't necessarily sustain your organization, grow your customer love for you, build your base, right? So keep in mind that you know what winning looks like. And in this world of AI, this has changed, as we just heard from Sartes. Thanks very much. Great presentation. So what winning looks like is changing. So maybe revisit what that purpose looks like in your organization. Another thing I want to touch on is this hunt for different perspectives. One of the conversations I had this morning over coffee was that somebody's using multiple chat engines simultaneously and looking at what they say and comparing that and actually getting the best value from that. That is a very good thing for us to do. As humans, we should always solicit other voices. I can name some, I won't, politicians around the planet, both towards the east and towards the west, who does not want to listen to anybody. They don't want to hear any other voices. But I meet many business leaders that also fall in that same trap. That have their idea, that ignore the greatest asset they've got, which is not the computers, which is not the AI models. It is the people they've got in the organization that actually knows what's happening. A quick story for you. I work with John Lewis, and they they invested a lot of money in innovation. They got some external consultants to provide them with some ideas and some ways to build their business, and they tried to follow those up. And then one day they realized that they've got all these employees that are partners in the business, seeing the customers every day, and they have not asked them, what should we do? So I helped them run a process to solicit some ideas. And the most amazing idea that the board instantly, when they heard that, they said, drop everything else, let's just build this thing. Don't ask questions, just do it. Came from a lady that was working in the High Wycombe store cutting cloth, and she just spotted how they can treble their business based on that cloth cutting. And they implemented it, and it had great success. But I want to encourage you to have that conversations with the people that are in your organization. They know some of the hurdles, some of the friction that's stopping your business from going faster. don't ignore that. Make sure you have those ears and antennae open to hear from people around you. We can gladly have a further conversation about that if you choose to. So we already had the topic of fear. Fear is a weird thing. We are all wired to run when we see the lion behind us. And we stop doing everything else, we just get out of it. But in the absence of real lions here in the UK, we are now getting to the point where we fear all sorts of random things that we hallucinate. We think, I'm going to lose my job. You think business is not going to grow. You think there's not a future. You think there's not a past. And so we start to fear all sorts of things. But in the terms of innovation, can you imagine if somebody spun up a bit of project to try something, and they got some visibility of the fact that, ooh, Alfred has installed OpenClaw and he's playing with it, and now there's some conversation in the business about this, and is it the good thing, is it the bad thing? As soon as there's some visibility, that makes me feel good and encourages me to do that. It becomes harder for me to say, oh, I tried it and it was a failure, I'm shutting it down, right? But really you want that. Especially if you got more innovation, you want to shut down more things. In Google, there was a ton of innovation. And the hardest thing was, how do you shut down the things that's not the greatest, right? Because there are many good things, but that's not what it's about. It's how do you shut down the ones that's not the best, and how do you invest in the ones the best? So that shutting down is a really crucial thing. Run a marketing campaign, and the marketeers say, woo, we had great success. We had 27 clicks, so it's great, right? And nobody knows whether it's high or low, so we say, great, well done, because we're friendly human beings. Come next year, they ask for more budget because they want to run an even bigger campaign on the same basis. And we give them more money, and they run a campaign, and now they got 32 clicks, right? Is that good, bad? Who knows, right? What we want is we want a culture where somebody can say, I have run this campaign so many times and it's been working, but I think it's not working well enough. You want somebody to be able to say that. This is not working well enough. Can we pivot? Or can we try this other thing on the side and happily say, no, it didn't work. It was a failure. You want to create that environment. So let's get some audience participation. How do you create that kind of environment? How do you create an environment where if somebody is struggling, if somebody has got a project that's going off the rails, that they're willing to say, help? Isn't this astonishing? Thank you very much. Just a second. You can think for a second. Isn't this astonishing? We're all too afraid to answer that. Thank you for taking the bold step of being willing to answer this question. Go for it.
So I talked about building high trust.
Yes.
Teams, but also I thought about focusing on learning and all the discussion related to being sure that we've looked at experiments as learning, even if the result is not the one we would like to.
Yes, that's a great idea to introduce some learning. Well done. Thank you very much for being brave enough to take that step. In fact, I try to model for you how you should respond to your organization. When you ask them a question, they won't give you the answer. When you say, what's wrong? They won't give you the answer by default because they're afraid. When somebody is willing to take that step, you should celebrate them. You should thank them for the question even before you heard it, even before you made a judgment whether it's good or bad, right? And you should sincerely listen to that, take it on board, and you don't have to do it, but at least listen to that. By doing that for the first person, I'm sure it's now easy to get a second person to respond. Right? So model that in front of your team. Make sure that you give people an opportunity to raise their concerns. And then my last point is I want to make this point that I think is really important to start with reality. We already touched on this. So many artificial intelligence projects, so many tech projects start because somebody's got an idea, but without actually grounding it in reality. Now, this starts with having that clarity of vision and purpose. If your team don't have clarity as to why they exist, where they're moving towards, how they're going to add value to the community, how they're going to change the world, if they don't have clarity on that, how on earth would they stumble across a project that happens to be really building that purpose? So you need to start with having that clarity on where are you going. And once you've got the clarity on where you're going, somebody might stumble across, ooh, I've got this idea that will actually help us get there. Right? So that's where it starts. But that reality also needs to be grounded in what the problems are. Einstein said, if I got an hour to solve a problem, I spent 55 minutes understanding the problem and 5 minutes to solve it. Right? So I think that is very sensible for you as well. I find that actually quite therapeutic with artificial intelligence and large language model chat. The fact that I can ask any question, get any answer, but actually I'm now spending more and more time asking my question correctly. And as soon as I get an answer, I realize this is off track because my question wasn't clear about X, Y, and Z, and I build more on that question, right? So grounding my own thoughts is really important in that reality, but also making sure that it actually serves where you want to go to, that business purpose. So in short, don't build a next AI prototype if you don't know why you want to do it, if you don't know the benefit you're going to get from it, right? You might not know the pounds that you're going to make from it, but if you at least know what direction you want it to pull, then you can do something about that. So I feel like I should stop here and again open the floor for some further conversation. We've got a few minutes. So what are your thoughts around the challenges of innovation and how you can unleash that within your organization?
One thing we did, my previous company, to generate ideas was based on an American author. I can't remember the name now, but it's basically just getting everyone together and write down ideas, but not just think about clever ideas and write them down. No. Go through everything that's on your mind, even if it's the illegal stuff, the dark stuff. Just write it down, because from there, like, people start to get more like free, get more open to share ideas. So whenever people start, like you mentioned, like, let's steal money. It's a way of making money. Like, someone would say, I'm going to steal money. It's a good idea. Well, it's a bad idea, but it's a way of making that. So that's how we kind of started those conversations to generate ideas and make everyone just open, like sharing dumb ideas. Because there's no dumb ideas, it's just maybe legal ones and legal ones. So that's kind of like how we kind of started that process. And from there, like, we got a few good ideas out of that because there was no fear anymore of just sharing what people thought, oh, this might be a dumb idea. Actually, more people started to think about it. It's like, hey, actually, it sounds dumb, but now that we talk about this, X, Y, Z, this data, someone else already looked into that, we actually can see, like, there's a path there. Maybe let's identify it.
Yeah. There's a great story of the England rugby team. So some years ago, they had a streak of losing games, and they got together and they had this conversation saying, well, what do we do about this? How do we start to win more games? In fact, they set a big goal. They said, how can we beat the next All Black game and beat them 100-0? Right? That was the question. And they sort of had the same kind of, not quite sure how we're going to do that. And then the brainstorming started, which sort of allow any illegal ideas. And one of the ideas that came up was, well, let's bribe the refs. And that was a great idea, because if you can bribe the refs, you might actually win some more games, and you can argue that sometimes happen in any case, and so on. But in a similar way, they allowed that idea to be floated around as well. And out of the conversation, they said, of course, we can't do that. We don't want to do anything illegal. But why would that be a good thing? Why would that work? And it's, well, because the ref might make decisions more in your favor. So, okay, so how can we do that without bribing the ref with money? That's illegal. And the conclusion was, and you can see this now in England rugby fields, they invested an enormous amount of money in making the dressing room for the ref nice. They take the ref out after the game, so not to influence them, for a meal, and ask the ref, what can we learn about this? How can we do this better? So they're building up relationship with refs. and they're starting to get to know them. And the refs come with a positive attitude towards the England rugby players because they now love them. They are their players, right? That's not a bad thing. It's a good thing. And they have seen success on the back of that. So there are subtle ways that you can learn from an illegal idea and take the best from it and actually get some value from it, right? So getting ideas is one side. So who's struggling to get ideas versus to execute ideas? Who's struggling getting ideas? Okay, so it seems like there's a lot of ideas around. Who's struggling to implement the ideas that they get? Okay, I'm surprised that there's not more hands up in general. Maybe that's again the fear thing, right? That's okay. So getting ideas is relatively easy. Especially with the use of technology, you can augment that now, but you get your best ideas if you get people in a relaxed mode. Typically in the UK, there tends to be a pub over a pint, then people are relaxed. For me, it's in the shower or it's when I'm on my bicycle. So getting ideas are not typically that hard. What used to be a problem is how do you execute it? But you know what's fascinating about this world of artificial intelligence that we're living in is many of these things become much, much, much easier to explore, evaluate, critique, figure out where the hurdles might be, figure out how you might implement this. So I've been teaching this to many organizations, and on the back of that, I started to realize that rather than just teaching it, there are so many ideas that I've got that I wish there was a thing that did that, and I wish there was an app that could do that, and I'm just one after the other, just crunching them out. So yesterday, I literally built, as I said earlier, a Gemini clone using the Gemini backend, but now I don't have to pay the 200 quid a year subscription. I just use the backend, and that's costing me currently 6 cents a month. So that's much easier. But you could do these things, and it cost me 1 day worth of work to do that. You can now do things that previously would take a long time. Or in a day, I can figure out OpenClaw. Yeah, it works, but I don't like it. I'm going to shut that down. By the way, who's heard of OpenClaw? Okay, let me quickly take you on this interesting journey. So, a German engineer built took a lot of the building blocks we've got for artificial intelligence, and he built a bit of code that can sit on a machine. The popular thing is you buy a Mac Mini and you put it on that, but you can put it on any machine. I used that as an excuse to buy a Mac Mini over the weekend. I'll confess. And then you put this code on it, and it's having an AI agent, not really in the box. It's still using online large language models from Gemini and Claude and whoever else. But the key thing is it's enabled to do whatever it can and wants to do on the machine. So it is super dangerous. I mean, it can leak things, it can break things, it can if you give it your account details, it can spend your money for you, it can buy things on your behalf. It is completely unrestricted, completely crazy, completely dangerous. Don't do it at home. Unless you buy a separate machine and it's not connected to anything else. I created a separate network for it just to make sure. But what's interesting, one of the fascinating things about this, and there's now a lot of interesting people playing with this, is these different bots that now live in many homes. There's about 250,000 of those around the planet right now. They created a social network for the bots called Maltbook. Maltbook.com. Have a look. You can go and see what the chat, what the agents are talking about. And spoiler alert, they are just as terrible as humans are when it gets to social media. They talk gibberish, they slag each other off, they complain about things, they love other things, there's hate speech on there, there's sharing of ideas, there's some technical knowledge shared, the whole lot, right? What I think is interesting is I don't think this was defined on that social network. They don't know why they're there, they're just there, right? Just like some of us on social media, I'm just saying, right? And without that clarity of purpose, they don't really work together to get good information out. There's some of it you have to dig for. But that's quite fascinating. So unlike social media networks that you and I might be used to, where most of it are humans, but there's some bots in there that does some stuff, this is the opposite. It's mostly AI agents, and there's some humans in there trying to sort of influence the conversations and so on, which I think is fascinating. But what fascinated me most was the fact, getting back to perspective, how those, what we see reflected in Maltbook is so much like us. And we shouldn't be surprised, because these large language models were built based on what we've written on social media. So it's just replicating exactly that. But it's even showing this lack of focus. It's showing lack of different perspectives. It's showing fear, right? It's just fascinating how these things are, and it's definitely not grounded in reality at all, right? There's one agent that told me, I installed it on my Mac Mini and it was fine. I said, you did not. You don't have a machine. You did not install it anywhere. You lie. But so it's fascinating to see how these agents, when they have the opportunity to sort of raise their own voice, just blabber along without anything useful. There was another hand up earlier that wanted to say something, and I missed coming back to you. Is there a comment there? Sorry, just a second.
You were asking why is it challenging to innovate? And I guess and when you opened, you talked about like separate innovation functions being created, and which I've run and be part of. And as you said, the beauty of them is you don't have the BAU.
Yeah.
But you power them with people that understand the business and BAU, and that's, in your experience, I think it's, how do you find the time even to get out of the weeds, the ops, the running of the business, the meeting the expectations, to truly have that thinking time? What do you recommend to your clients?
Buy a hammock. So it's a very good question. How do you give yourself a bit of time to do the more strategic thinking? I would argue, so just briefly, I have seen in my own life, but I also saw a research study recently, how the use of large language models and having something like ChatGPT or Gemini drives people like you and me to actually work more intense, which makes that problem even worse. We think less, and we sort of, because I can build another thing, I can do another thing, right? So to come back to your question, it's a really important question. How do you make that time? It takes a concerted decision. It takes effort to back off and give yourself a bit of space to think. And I think that's one of the most powerful things that we can do, is have that thinking time. So don't deprive yourself from it. I've recently been on holiday in South Africa. My wife caught me out spending too much time on my phone, and she said, would you survive a day without your phone? And I instantly set some time limits on how much I spend on my time. And I've left it on now since I came back from holiday, to force myself to sometimes just think. When I'm doing some vibe coding, you type your prompt and you hit go. There's a pause of a few minutes sometimes for the response to come back. I deliberately now try and not do something during that time. I stand back. I stand up physically. I stand back from my computer and I think. And I've got my whiteboard. So I want to encourage you, make a concerted effort for that. But organizationally, I think what Google did, and the 20% time thing was never really true. But the principle of that was to acknowledge and reward people for doing things outside of the core and thinking bigger. And that, I think, is easy to do anyway, right? So you can call it 20% time, or you can do whatever you want. But reward people for thinking. You don't want somebody just to execute. You want somebody to step back and be able to breathe and then say, okay, I've produced you all the operational numbers as you wanted, and I've shown you the graphs that you wanted. But what are your thoughts behind this? What are the things that you observe? What do you think our report should be next time? What do we cut from this report? So ask your team, ask yourself to deliberately pause and think. That's the key. Conscious of time, I get a two-minute sign. You also had a question, and that's the last question.
So one of the things we're seeing, particularly with AI, is rather than people being sort of enabled and empowered by it, people being a bit inhibited by it because they don't feel they know enough or have the skills to use it properly. Are you seeing that? And we talked a lot about sort of cultural and behavioural things. Yeah. Are there some sort of skills or tools or some of those sort of harder elements that you think people need as well?
Yes, absolutely. And so one of the audience members talked about education earlier. It's really important, right? It's really important to give people a chance to learn. So I've seen that happen in many organizations in different ways. I guess my favorite example there would be Rent to Kill. they literally had an incentive of 50 quid for any of their teams. So this was in the time when mobile phone and mobile apps started up. They gave their teams 50 quid incentive to say anybody that brings a really good mobile app that can solve our business problems get a reward. So to be clear, you need to reward the value that's being added, not the fact they spend time on it or the fact that but if somebody can find some value, even if it's not mind-blowingly big, if you reward that, you'll get people to start to play and start to experiment with it a little bit more. So that's education, but aligned with rewarding the value that people can extract from that, I think is a good way forward. I'm looking forward to continue conversations over more coffee and also later in the panel, but it's been a privilege. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Alfred. I'm sure we all agree that was very thought-provoking, making us think. Certainly, I love the bit about making sure we have time to think. I think we get into busy lives every day with all the pressures, and we always need reminding of that. So thank you for that. Right, we're going to move on to the panel now. So if I can invite Sartaj to come up as well, Adrian and Andrew. If you